This is the Volvo EX90, Volvo's full electric 7-seater flagship fully electric full-size SUV. It's quite a mouthful, but it is one big piece of a car, I tell you that. We're here in my first driving experience. If you've been watching the channel, you know that a few months ago I was at the launch of this vehicle at Volvo's hometown of Gothenburg, and it's finally made its way down south here to Malta, where I am testing it out on Maltese roads. And what I want to find out are the answers to a few questions. Number one being, what is the real world driving range we can expect from such a large vehicle with such an incredible amount of power? We're talking 500 plus horsepower in this beast, right? Also have figured out this feature which I'm dying to try out, which is basically a one pedal driving mode, but rather than every other car I've seen which has basically an on and off, they have an auto function, which was like, ooh, what does that do? So I'm really curious to try that out. I'm Luke, welcome to this episode of The Future is Electric. My first impressions, as soon as you step in, you're definitely seated very, very high up. You can just tell, just from viewing out of the windows here, how much bigger you feel than everyone else. And you definitely feel the presence of this rather large vehicle around you, particularly on the Maltese, very small city streets here. But of course, it's a massive car, right? And it weighs, and I'm not kidding, 2.7 tons. 600 kilos of that is just the battery pack. But let me tell you, and I say this genuinely, you would never know that. Particularly in this version they've given me today, which is the top of the range dual motor performance version, which essentially has the same level of horsepower as some supercars. 512 horsepower. At no point does this vehicle feel sluggish or feel like it weighs 2.7 tons, right? Tap the accelerator and the power is delivered instantly. That is the beautiful instant torque we get from electrification. Now, in terms of the cabin and the driving experience here, so Volvo claim this is their quietest cabin ever made, and you know what? It is definitely very quiet in here. I wouldn't say it's the quietest I've felt for the cabin noise when testing, but you definitely can't fault them and say that this is not good. In terms of the ride quality though, this is 100% where it's at. Of course, this car sits on air suspension units, which makes this ride not only extremely smooth from the electric nature of it, but just insanely comfortable. I mean, you just glide along. Alright, so I've turned on the one pedal driving. Firstly, what's that for anyone who doesn't know? So electric cars have the ability to essentially recharge the battery while you are driving. They do this when you are slowing down or braking. Now, rather than initiating the normal friction brakes, which the car definitely has when you press on the brake pedal here, the car actually uses the electric motors themselves in reverse to slow down the vehicle. And an additional benefit to that is that the energy coming from the braking is fed back into the battery to be used again, essentially recharging the car as you go. Brilliant. Now, some automakers, including Volvo here in this EX90, have taken this to a whole other level with what is called one pedal driving. So you activate it from the screen over here, and basically this means I do not need to use the brake pedal practically at all unless it's like an emergency brake. I basically lift my foot off the accelerator and the car will start to slow down with sort of the correct intensity you would need, and yes, does come to a complete halt. But And this is where it gets really interesting, because this is the first time I've seen this, right? We have an on, off, and then auto mode. Now, I have never seen this before. And basically, the car is using all the sensors it has. We'll get into those in a second, because it's just a colossal amount of sensors, right? To understand the road conditions ahead and basically turn on the one pedal driving when you need it, which is generally when you're stuck in traffic / need to slow down, and then turning it off when, say, we're on a road like this, which is, you know, a fast-paced moving road where I do not want to lift my foot off the accelerator and slow down, but instead I want to coast. This is an incredible feature, and from my testing today, it has worked brilliantly. To be fair, although it's referred differently in some other models, say those cars running on that MEB platform, they have what they call their dynamic regen, I believe, which is sort of the same thing here, but here they're pairing it with a full one pedal driving mode, which the MEB platform does not. The car does not come to a complete halt in that dynamic mode, but here it will. Now, in terms of driving modes, so usually nearly every other car we see, we've got our sport mode, our normal mode, our eco mode. But Volvo have done something different here. I haven't managed, I've been digging around the menu for a while to find anything similar to that. However, what we do have is essentially the ability to force it into performance mode, which is literally like a checkbox. And what that does, it force engages the rear motor, which by standard is actually going to be decoupled. So it's sort of unplugging itself in the name of the best efficiency and range. Now, besides that, we also have the ability to adjust the steering wheel feel and the suspension feel in 2 settings, either soft or firm, and I have switched it out now from the soft mode. I think one thing that's happened in the auto industry is that essentially car brands which were bigger than others were just started buying each other off, and we've ended up with the entire auto industry being owned by a few select companies. And in that process, these companies would essentially design one platform, and then they'd share that platform and a bunch of other things with the different car brands that they own. And what tends to happen, I feel, when we do this, is then you're looking at a car and you're just trying to find its unique selling features, and no matter how hard you try, sometimes it's frankly not there. There's nothing unique about it. It's exactly like every other car on that platform. Now, I'm saying this because I think Volvo, in this very sort of reality we are facing, have always been true to what their unique selling product is in their vehicles. And that is safety. Safety has always been at the forefront of Volvo's ethos, and they actually were the first to introduce the seatbelt way back before it was mandatory, and they've actually made a pledge that nobody should die or be seriously injured in a Volvo car, and they've since updated that pledge to basically be that they want their cars to essentially avoid all sorts of incidents. It's quite a task, but how do they get there? And possibly this car, the EX90, their most technologically advanced one yet, is the first step towards getting to that goal. So how do they do it? Well, first they put 8 cameras looking out of the vehicle. 8! That's as many as you would find in a film studio. We've got 3 cameras facing forward, 2 cameras on either of the mirrors, and 1 facing the rear. Why are they there? They're there to get an accurate picture of the world around the car, so the car can take this data, put it into its safe space technology algorithm, and essentially make the best calls. But it doesn't just rely on cameras. The car also has a dozen or so ultrasonic and different sensors around the vehicle as well, which are also inputting into that system. And if that's not enough, this is the first car, to my knowledge, here in Malta for sure, if not the whole Eurozone, which is essentially introducing a LiDAR unit on the roof. Now, the LiDAR unit is a laser scanner, and its job is basically to view the world by essentially firing out lasers at the objects around the car, in particular the front portion, measuring the reflection or the time it takes for that laser light to bounce back, and using that information to build an accurate 3D model of the world. Now, what makes LiDAR great is in the dead of night, where some of the cameras are frankly useless, a LiDAR system can work because it does not need any light coming from the outside. It generates the laser beams itself, which means the LiDAR unit is able to essentially see a black tire, this is what Volvo say, lying on the road 250 meters away in the dead of night. And all of these systems are going to play towards that goal. Besides that, there's obviously also a host of sensors in the interior of the car, some of which looking directly at me and warn me if I somehow am distracted from looking where I should be looking here as I am driving. So, is this the safest car Volvo have ever made? Probably. Is this the safest car ever made in general? Well, that's debatable, but I think the technology is here to definitely earn its ranks among those few select cars which can claim that title. So let me tell you a bit about this interior. So Volvo have gone for their sort of classic at the moment, minimalistic design, but the fit and finish is definitely up there with the best, which this car, let's be honest, at the price point it sits at, is competing with. So all the quality of the materials, even though we even have some recycled materials in here, are of a very high level of quality. There is a clear absence of physical buttons, right? Everything, you could say, is controlled from the huge, to be fair, center portrait oriented touchscreen. And when a brand, and many brands are taking this sort of risk where they just go full on with all the controls in the screen, you have to get your graphics and your user interface right. And I think Volvo here do get it right, and they really hit the nail on the head in every aspect with regards to the screen. It is responsive, it is bright, it is crisp, it is everything you want. And yes, there is a bit of a learning curve, but after that, everything sort of in the UI makes sense to where it needs to be. I mean, you're gonna find people complaining that yes, even to adjust the mirrors, you have to go into the screen. Even to adjust the steering wheel position, you have to go into the screen. But let's be honest, guys. How many times do we adjust the steering wheel, and how many times do you have to adjust the mirrors? You do it once or twice. So the fact that you have to go digging in a screen for that, I don't see it as an issue. The screen here is paired with a second instrument cluster screen, so different to the EX30, which we also saw on the channel, which did not have the screen in front of us. Again, very, very crisp, and the brightness is actually dialed in perfectly. I've driven this car on a very sunny day here in Malta, yet both screens, graphics, wearing my sunglasses and not wearing them, the graphics are extremely bright and super sharp. It feels like an OLED display where the blacks are pretty black, which helps all the colors pop. So excellent over there. Gear selector is behind the steering wheel. Again, a lot of these features accept the screen like the EX30, including the steering wheel. From the best of my memory, this is a very similar steering wheel, including the gear selector and indicator knob over here. Moving down to the center console, of course, I have to mention air condition as well from the screen. Wireless charger is over here. You can just dump your phone over there, and we also get some cup holders which you can close to hide away, to help with the minimalism of the car when you're not in need of cup holders. And one of the only physical buttons available here is the volume knob, which also acts as a sort of play pause button, but there's also a left right nudge to it, and it is the only physical button, and it's definitely been made of very high quality. I'll correct myself, not the only physical button, because we do have the mirror switches, sorry, not the mirror, the window switches on the doors, although you only get a pair, and then like the EX30 you have to press a button to bring down the windows in the back. Speaking about the back gets to enjoy this amazingly huge glass panoramic sunroof, which adds a lot more room to this already very spacious cabin. I did sit in the back with my driving seat in the driving position, and the space back there is insane in terms of legroom. I did also venture to the third row of seats. Over there it does get pretty tight for someone of my size, 1.83 m, so you can definitely put some kids back there, but adults in that back row are gonna have a bit of a hard time. But so keep that in mind. The second row gets its own separate air conditioning control, so that's very nice to see as well. I think they've done a brilliant job with the interior. This version that I'm in has the optional Bowers & Wilkinson sound system. I'm not kidding, 25 speakers, including Atmos speakers in the ceiling of the car, and also speakers in the car's headrest to really envelop you and sort of put you in your own zone, especially when it comes to them. I've tested it out. It is definitely up there with the best. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a demo of that because anything I play is going to get flagged for copyright. So, but you have to take my word for it. It's pretty awesome. All right, so I've just finished my real-world driving test, and just to run you through the methodology here before I give you the results. Basically, on the channel I always drive the cars 50 kilometers here in Malta, more or less the same route. What varies are the traffic conditions a bit, and obviously the weather, but for the most part we're running it in the same conditions. Now then, I look at the kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and knowing the size of the battery, we can deduce the real world driving range. I am not going off the range shown over here, which is sort of a guesstimate being done by the car. So in this drive, I averaged 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers after 50 kilometers of driving, which, let me tell you, for a car the size of a tank and the 2.7 tons in weight, I think that's a pretty good result here in the real world. But what does these numbers translate in terms of real world range? So I remind you, this twin motor performance, 580 kilometers WLTP claimed range. And today in my driving test, I have gotten 535 kilometers real world driving. So we are shy of that figure being given by Volvo. This tends to happen quite a bit, especially in non-ideal climate for electric vehicles, where it's really cold or where there's very high speeds. So we are shy, and I will be honest and fair here. Even when I tested the EX30 earlier this year, I was shy of the WLTP figure, something I have been able to achieve in other cars on the same driving test sort of methodology. Is this something to be worried about? Not really. We're talking 535 kilometers real world range on a single charge, and for sure a lot better than, say, our friends in the UK are going to get were they to be driving this exact same car in their much colder highway conditions. So 535 kilometers here in Malta means you're charging this car literally once every 3 to 4 weeks. So you're dealing with charging 12 times a year. So I don't think this is going to be a huge issue. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was excited to try out this car for a number of reasons. Number one, I've only been doing this for 3 years, and the launch, Volvo's essentially event where they launched this car here in Europe, in Sweden, Gothenburg, at their headquarters, was essentially my first international car launch. I've of course been to many car launches here in Malta, but in terms of a car launch where they first reveal the car to the world, this was my first one. So after seeing it and being at that event, I was very excited to finally get to drive it some months later here, as you can see. So I had high expectations because this is their flagship model, and I believe it definitely delivers on all accounts, really. I have little to no complaints about this car. Of course, it does sit in a price range that few will be able to tap, but that doesn't mean Volvo shouldn't make this car to start with. I'm glad as a 7-seater luxury SUV it exists for the world to enjoy. On the topic of enjoying, if you enjoyed my video, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe for more EV content. It's worth mentioning as well that this is the second video I've done on the EX90. The first video is my tech focus review, which is, I believe, still quite unique on YouTube. I do a review on the car's technical features, which many reviewers on YouTube, coming especially from sort of the classic car reviewing world, frankly do not do. And I do think we do need to start giving an importance to the battery and electric tech inside vehicles, as these cars become even more so computers on wheels rather than just mechanical bits and bobs put together. But on that note, thank you for watching, and as always, I hope me and the Volvo EX90 have convinced you that the future is electric. Hi guys, again, thanks so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you hit the subscribe button over here. If you're a frequent viewer